A gunshot echoed through the golden cornfield as Victoria Owens dove to the ground, her heart hammering in her chest, the memories of her late husband's violent end still fresh in her mind even after 2 years. The Wyoming Territory of 1876 was no place for a woman alone, but Victoria had no choice but to keep working her small homestead if she wanted to survive another harsh winter. The shot hadn't been aimed at her, just some distant hunter. She reasoned, but the sudden noise had caused her to lose her footing while gathering the last of her autumn corn. She winced as pain shot through her ankle, the basket of corn spilling across the dry earth, golden kernels scattering like lost dreams. "Madam, you all right there?" The deep voice startled her, and Victoria turned to see a tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. He dismounted from his horse with fluid grace and approached, his spurs jingling with each step. "I'm fine," she lied, attempting to gather the spilled corn, her ankle throbbing. "Just startled by that shot. Let me help you with that." He knelt beside her, and she got her first good look at him, weathered face, kind eyes the color of the summer sky, and a jawline that spoke of determination. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, and the 6-shooter at his hip looked well-maintained. "Name's Jackson Archer. Most folks call me Jack." "Victoria Owens," she replied, watching as his calloused hands carefully gathered her corn. "You're not from around here." "Just passing through," he said, filling her basket. "Heading to Sweetwater, got some business there." He glanced at her ankle, which was beginning to swell. "That looks bad." "May I?" Before she could protest, he gently examined her ankle, his touch surprisingly gentle for hands so clearly accustomed to hard work. "It's just a sprain," he said, "but you shouldn't walk on it." "Where's your homestead?" Victoria pointed toward the small cabin visible in the distance. "I'll help you home and then be on my way," he said, standing and offering his hand. "I promise you'll have peace to heal up proper." Little did either of them know that this chance meeting would change both their lives forever. Jackson gathered Victoria in his arms despite her protests, set her on his horse, and handed her the corn basket before leading the animal toward her cabin. The homestead was modest, but well-maintained, a cabin with smoke curling from the chimney, a small barn, and a chicken coop. A few cattle grazed in a nearby pasture. "You manage all this yourself?" he asked, impressed. Victoria nodded. "Since my husband Thomas died 2 years ago, fever took him quick." "I'm sorry for your loss," Jackson said, helping her down from the horse. "My wife Sarah and my boy passed 5 years back. Cholera." Their eyes met in shared understanding, the kind only those who have known deep loss can exchange. Once inside, Jackson helped Victoria to a chair and found clean rags to wrap her ankle. The cabin was neat and homey, with simple furnishings and the smell of fresh bread in the air. "You're good at that," Victoria observed as he carefully wrapped her ankle. "Spent some time as a field medic during the war," he explained. "Among other things." "The war?" she asked. Jackson nodded. "Fought for the Union. Came west after it was over. Couldn't stand the memories back east." He tied off the bandage. "There, keep it elevated. I should be on my way." Victoria glanced out the window at the darkening sky. "Nightfall's coming. It's dangerous to travel these parts after dark." "I can offer you the barn for the night, Mr. Archer." "Jack," he corrected, "and I don't want to impose." "It's not imposing if I'm offering," Victoria said firmly. "Besides, I owe you for the help." Jackson hesitated, then nodded. "Much obliged. I'll tend to your livestock before settling in." "You don't have to," Victoria began. "I know," he interrupted with a small smile. "But I want to." As Jackson headed out to care for her animals, Victoria felt something stir within her that she hadn't felt since Thomas died, not just gratitude, but interest. This wandering cowboy with the kind hands and sad eyes intrigued her in ways she couldn't explain. The next morning, Victoria awoke to the smell of coffee. Limping to the kitchen, she found Jackson at her stove frying eggs. "Hope you don't mind," he said. "Figured you could use a hot breakfast." "Thank you," she said, genuinely touched. Few men knew their way around a kitchen over breakfast. Jackson explained his business. I'm heading to Sweetwater to meet with a man about starting a cattle operation, been saving for years. Sweetwater's still 3 days' ride, Victoria noted. And that storm brewing to the north looks mean. As if on cue, thunder rolled in the distance. Your ankle needs rest, Jackson said. I could stay another day, help with what needs doing around here before the storm hits, in exchange for shelter. Victoria knew she should refuse a strange man on her homestead could lead to talk, but her practical side won out. I'd be grateful, she admitted. There's wood needs splitting and corn to bring in. Jackson spent the day working harder than many hired hands would have, splitting enough firewood to last weeks and bringing in the remainder of her corn harvest. Victoria watched from the porch, mending clothes, impressed by his efficiency and the ease with which he handled each task. By evening, the storm was upon them, rain lashing at the windows as they shared a simple supper of rabbit stew. "This is delicious," Jackson said appreciatively. "My mother's recipe," Victoria explained. "One of the few things from Virginia I brought west. Virginia, that's a long way to come." Victoria nodded. Thomas had dreams of building something of our own, away from the ruins of the war. She looked down. He was a good man, had big plans. "And you stayed even after. This land is mine now," Victoria said, a fierceness in her voice. "I won't give up what we worked so hard to build." Jackson nodded in understanding. "Admirable. Many would have sold and gone back east. Where would I go, to be someone's burden? No, thank you." Victoria raised her chin. "I'd rather face the elements and occasional bandits than become someone's charity case." "Bandits?" Jackson's eyes narrowed. "You've had trouble?" Victoria hesitated. "Some, nothing I couldn't handle with my shotgun." Jackson's expression darkened. "A woman alone makes an easy target for some men." "I manage," Victoria said simply. That night, as the storm raged outside, Victoria lay awake listening to the occasional sounds of Jackson moving about in her barn. There was something comforting about having another person nearby, especially one who seemed both capable and respectful. The storm lasted 3 days, during which Jackson made himself invaluable repairing a leak in the roof, reinforcing the chicken coop, and even fashioning a walking stick for Victoria. They fell into an easy rhythm, sharing meals and stories as the rain continued to fall. Victoria learned that Jackson had been a rancher's son from Missouri, had fought at Shiloh and Gettysburg, and had wandered the West working as a cowhand, scout, and occasionally as a deputy when towns needed extra guns. He spoke little of his wife and son, but when he did, the pain in his eyes was still raw. In turn, she told him of growing up on a Virginia plantation, of meeting Thomas at a county fair, and of their journey west with nothing but dreams and determination. She found herself speaking of things she'd told no one, her fears of failing, of losing the homestead, of growing old alone. On the 4th morning, the sun finally emerged, and Victoria's ankle was much improved. "I should move on," Jackson said over breakfast, though Victoria noticed he didn't meet her eyes when he said it. "Yes," she agreed, ignoring the sinking feeling in her stomach. "You've your meeting in Sweetwater." Jackson nodded and began gathering his few belongings. Victoria limped out to the porch to see him off, the walking stick he'd made thumping against the wooden boards. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mrs. Owens," Jackson said formally as he mounted his horse. "Victoria," she corrected softly, "and thank you for your help, Jack." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, and Victoria thought he might say something more. Instead, he tipped his hat, turned his horse, and rode away. She watched until he disappeared over the ridge, telling herself the heaviness in her chest was merely disappointment at losing such capable help around the homestead. 2 weeks passed. Victoria's ankle healed completely, and she fell back into her solitary routine. But thoughts of Jackson Archer kept intruding, his quiet competence, the sadness behind his smile, the gentleness in his hands despite their strength. She chided herself for such foolishness. A passing cowboy had shown her kindness, nothing more. Then one afternoon, as Victoria was mending a fence, she spotted a rider approaching. Her hand instinctively moved toward the rifle leaning against the fence post before she recognized the silhouette. Jackson Archer rode up to her homestead, his horse laden with supplies. "Mrs. Owens," he greeted, dismounting. "Mr. Archer," she returned, unable to keep a small smile from her lips. "Sweetwater not to your liking? The deal fell through," he explained. "Man was asking too much for poor land." Victoria nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I was heading back east when I realized," Jackson removed his hat, turning it in his hands, "that I couldn't stop thinking about a certain homestead with a stubborn widow who might need help bringing in the rest of her harvest before winter." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "I'm offering my services for room and board," Jackson said. "Just until the first snow, then I'll be on my way if you want." Victoria considered him, noting the hope in his eyes that he was trying to conceal. "The barn gets mighty cold at night," she said finally. "There's a cot in the spare room you can use." She turned and headed toward the house, hiding her smile as she heard his footsteps following. Jackson became a fixture at the homestead. He repaired fences, built a proper smokehouse for the coming winter, and even traded with passing merchants for supplies Victoria needed. His presence made the days less lonely and the work less overwhelming. They developed a comfortable routine, sharing meals and evenings by the fire, talking or sometimes just sitting in companionable silence. Yet beneath the surface, something else was growing. Victoria caught herself watching the way the sunlight played on his hair as he worked, or how his eyes crinkled when he laughed. She told herself it was merely appreciation for his help, but her heart knew better. For his part, Jackson found reasons to stay close to the house, to engage Victoria in conversation, to make her laugh. Her strength and determination impressed him, and her rare smiles made something long dormant stir in his chest. The first snow came in mid-November, earlier than expected. They spent the day securing the homestead for the coming winter, working side by side against the increasing flurries. That evening, as they sat before the fire, Victoria finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "The snow's here," she said softly. "Will you be leaving now?" Jackson stared into the flames for a long moment. "Do you want me to go?" Victoria took a deep breath. "No," she admitted, "I don't." Jackson turned to face her, his expression serious. "I haven't felt this way since Sarah," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I didn't expect it. Didn't go looking for it." "Nor I since Thomas," Victoria whispered. "I'm not a wealthy man," Jackson continued. "I have some savings, enough to buy a small spread someday, but I can work hard and I can be loyal." He reached for her hand. "I can promise you peace, Victoria, and protection. And companionship, for as long as you'll have me." Victoria looked down at their joined hands, remembering how those same hands had helped her up when she fell in her cornfield months ago. "I'm not looking for someone to take care of me," she said carefully. "I've managed on my own." "I know," Jackson said. "That's part of why I admire you so. I'm not offering to take over your life, Victoria. I'm offering to share it." Victoria met his gaze, seeing the sincerity there and something more, a tenderness that made her heart race. "Stay," she said simply. "Stay for the winter. Let's see where this leads." Jackson's smile was like the sunrise after a long night. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "That's all I ask." Winter in Wyoming Territory was harsh but beautiful. Snow blanketed the land, transforming the homestead into a pristine wonderland. Inside the cabin, Victoria and Jackson found a new rhythm to their days, he teaching her to play chess by the fire, she showing him how to make her mother's special Christmas bread. They shared stories of their pasts, of joys and sorrows, dreams abandoned and new ones forming. Victoria spoke of her wish to expand the homestead, perhaps add a proper orchard come spring. Jackson told her of his years spent learning cattle breeding, how he hoped to develop a hardier stock that could withstand the Wyoming winters better. Their first kiss came on Christmas Eve, as they stood looking out at the star-filled sky. It was tentative at first, both of them uncertain, but soon blossomed into something that left them breathless and wondering why they'd waited so long. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Victoria Owens," Jackson whispered against her hair. "I think I've already fallen, Jackson Archer," she confessed. The winter nights seemed less cold after that, even as the temperature dropped and blizzards howled outside their walls. In February, tragedy nearly struck. Jackson fell through ice while checking beaver traps along the creek, and Victoria managed to pull him out, but not before the frigid water had done its damage. For 3 days, he burned with fever, delirious and weak. Victoria barely slept, tending him constantly, applying cold compresses and forcing sips of water between his cracked lips. On the 3rd night, as his fever finally broke, Jackson opened his eyes to find Victoria slumped in a chair beside the bed, exhausted but vigilant. "You saved me," he whispered. Victoria stirred, relief flooding her face. "You're not allowed to die on me, Jack Archer. I've buried one husband, I won't bury another." It wasn't until she saw his expression that Victoria realized what she'd said. She blushed but didn't take back the words. Jackson reached for her hand. "Is that what you want? For me to be your husband?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "I never thought I'd want another after Thomas, but yes, it is." Jackson pulled her down beside him on the bed, holding her close despite his weakness. "Then marry me, Victoria. Not because you need help with this land, not because you're lonely, but because what we've found together is rare and precious." Victoria's answer was a kiss that conveyed everything words could not. They were married in April, when the first wildflowers pushed through the melting snow. The ceremony was small, just the circuit preacher, a few neighboring homesteaders, and the station master and his wife from the nearest settlement. Victoria wore a blue dress that matched Jackson's eyes, and he wore the one good suit he owned, freshly pressed. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promising to face life's joys and hardships together, to honor the memories of those they'd lost while building something new. That spring and summer were filled with hard work and happiness. They expanded the homestead, adding a proper root cellar and starting construction on a larger barn. Jackson bought a small herd of cattle with his savings, implementing his breeding ideas with Victoria's full support. She, in turn, planted the orchard she'd dreamed of, with Jackson digging holes for each sapling. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in impossible colors, talking of the future and occasionally of the past. The ghosts of Thomas, Sarah, and Jackson's son Daniel were not forgotten, but their memories became less painful and more precious with time. Victoria found herself laughing more than she had in years. Jackson discovered a talent for storytelling that delighted Victoria and later the children of neighboring homesteads who would visit on Sundays after church. Their first major challenge came in late summer, when a group of cattle rustlers began operating in the area. Several homesteads had been hit, and rumors spread of violence against those who resisted. "Maybe we should sell the cattle," Victoria suggested one night as they discussed the threat. "It's not worth risking our lives." Jackson shook his head. "This is our home, our livelihood." "I won't be driven off by thieves." He took her hands in his. "But I promised you peace, and I mean to keep that promise. I'll speak with the other ranchers tomorrow about forming a protective association." The ranchers agreed readily to Jackson's proposal. They established patrols and a system of warnings using mirror flashes during the day and lantern signals at night. Jackson's experience as a deputy proved valuable as he helped organize the men. The rustlers struck the Archer homestead on a moonless night in September. Victoria was awakened by the distant sound of cattle lowing in distress. Jackson was already up, loading his rifle. "Stay inside," he instructed, but Victoria was already reaching for her shotgun. "This is our home," she reminded him, "our cattle, our livelihood." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm not letting you face this alone." Pride and worry warred in Jackson's expression, but he nodded. "Stay behind me, and if I tell you to run, you run." They slipped out the back door and made their way toward the cattle pen. In the darkness, they could make out several figures herding their small herd toward the property line. Jackson fired a warning shot into the air. "That's far enough," he called out. "Leave the cattle and ride away and there won't be any trouble." The response was immediate, a shot that whistled past Jackson's ear. He pulled Victoria down behind a water trough as more shots followed. "Light the signal lantern," he whispered. Victoria crawled to where they kept the special lantern with the red glass and lit it, raising it 3 times in the prearranged signal for help. A gunfight ensued, with Jackson picking his shots carefully while Victoria reloaded for him. The rustlers, realizing they faced determined resistance, began to withdraw, abandoning the cattle. Just as it seemed they were retreating, Victoria spotted a shadow moving toward the barn. "Jack, the barn!" Jackson turned in time to see one of the rustlers attempting to set fire to the structure. Without hesitation, Victoria raised her shotgun and fired, hitting the man in the leg. He went down with a cry of pain. By the time neighboring ranchers arrived, the rustlers had fled, leaving behind their wounded companion and the stolen cattle. The wounded rustler, a young man barely in his 20s, was taken into custody. His information led to the capture of the entire gang a week later. The territory marshal commended both Victoria and Jackson for their bravery, but it was the respect in Jackson's eyes that meant the most to Victoria. "You're quite the woman, Victoria Archer," he said that night as they lay in bed. "I thought I was promising to protect you when we wed, but it seems we protect each other." Victoria smiled in the darkness. "That's what marriage should be, I think, equal partners facing the world together." Jackson pulled her closer. "I keep finding new reasons to love you." As their first anniversary approached, Victoria had news that both terrified and delighted her. She waited for the right moment to tell Jackson, finally choosing a quiet evening when they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the twilight. "Jack," she began hesitantly, "do you ever regret not having more children?" Jackson looked surprised at the question. "I've thought about it," he admitted, "but I've been content with what we have." Victoria took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "What if we could have more?" It took a moment for understanding to dawn on Jackson's face. When it did, his expression transformed from confusion to wonder to pure joy. "You're with child," he whispered, awe in his voice. Victoria nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Due in winter. I'm a bit scared, Jack. I'm not as young as I was." Jackson gathered her in his arms. "You're the strongest woman I know, Victoria Archer, and we'll face this together like we do everything else." He placed a gentle hand on her abdomen. "A baby," he murmured, sounding stunned and happy. The following months were filled with preparations. Jackson built a cradle, lovingly carving designs of corn stalks and wildflowers into the wood. Victoria sewed tiny garments from the softest cloth she could find, often working by lamplight after the day's chores were done. Their son, Thomas Daniel Archer, was born on a snowy December night with the help of a neighboring woman who served as midwife. He had his father's blue eyes and a tuft of dark hair like his mother's. "He's perfect," Jackson whispered, holding his son for the first time, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "Thank you for this gift, Victoria." Victoria, exhausted but radiant, reached up to touch the faces of her husband and son. "We're a family," she said softly. "A real family." The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. The homestead prospered under their joint care, and Jackson's cattle breeding program gained recognition throughout the territory. Victoria's orchard began to bear fruit, and she developed a small but profitable business selling preserved fruits to passing merchants. They welcomed a daughter, Sarah Elizabeth, 2 years after Thomas was born. The children grew strong and healthy in the Wyoming air, learning the value of hard work and the importance of family from their parents' example. Victoria sometimes marveled at how her life had changed since that autumn day when she fell in her cornfield, and a kind cowboy helped her up, promising peace. What Jackson had given her was far more a partnership built on respect and love, a family that honored the past while embracing the future, and a home filled with laughter and warmth. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Victoria turned to Jackson. "Do you remember what you said to me that day we met, that you promised me peace?" Jackson smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "I remember, though I didn't know then how much you'd come to mean to me." "You kept that promise," Victoria said, taking his hand, "but you gave me so much more." Jackson leaned over to kiss her gently. "As did you, my love, as did you." In the distance, the sun set over the Wyoming plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The Archer homestead stood strong against the approaching dusk, a beacon of what could be built from chance meetings and second chances. And as darkness fell, lamps were lit in the windows, casting a warm glow that welcomed all who passed by, a testament to the love and life that had grown from a simple act of kindness in a cornfield, where a widow fell and a cowboy helped her up, promising peace but delivering happiness beyond measure.